So before you can do anything about trading psychology, you have to have an understanding of the whole thought process and the way we think. Well, I would, I would always finish prospecting because it goes into much greater detail. Thinking Fast and Slow is a much broader book, which will give you a much, let's say, a much broader idea of the way the human psyche works and the way humans think. But the reason I suggest you read Prospector because it is particularly directed at behavioural economics and what we do, and understanding why, and our attitude to profit and loss, and risk and loss, and that's important for you to get the hang of. Okay, and as I said, this particular segment that we're going to do now is all about understanding losses. Personally, this is my favourite segment of the whole course. I actually think it is the most important part of the course. Because as a trader myself, I understand how I react to loss and how a lot of other traders react to loss, and how this can adversely affect the way we trade. And the first thing to really look at, or to start with, is to understand that the human psyche actually deals with profit and loss in totally different ways. And this is quite an interesting finding, really. And the piece of information that I find most fascinating is the fact that, did you realize that the pain caused by actually losing money or any loss, it could be emotional loss, is actually 2 to 4 times greater than the pleasure got from any profit that you actually received. Did anybody ever heard that before? Or can anybody identify with that? Can you identify with the idea that losing creates greater pain than winning at something? Well, then, what about Salma? Or had you not thought about it? I'll try and make this a lot more interactive today if I can. There's only a few of us, so I'll try and ask a lot of questions. And Kevin, yeah. Yes, try and think back into your experience, Ron, the way maybe it might be, as I said, it might be an emotional death or something, or as against the joy of winning something. You'll always find that emotional loss or any sort of loss tends to have a much greater impact on you. And as I said, most psychologists have assessed that this is roughly 2 to 4 times greater than any pleasure you'll get through profit. So the question I want to ask you is, how would that translate to your behavior? How do you think that's going to translate to your trading? Anybody going to give me how do you think that's going to? Yeah, that's true. It's true, but it has a more immediate effect on your actual trading that you're doing. Yeah, that also is very true, Thumb. Think of the case of when you're immediately in a trade. What do you think is likely to happen? You've taken a trade and you're losing as opposed to winning, and then you're winning as opposed to what's likely to happen because of this? 2 things tend to happen. Right, that's a good point, right? That's true as well. That's very true, Kevin. That's an excellent answer. Yeah, but I'll explain what I mean. what usually happens is this. It actually has an interesting effect, because what it tends to do is, it means that if you're in a trade and you're losing, your immediate issue is that you understand the pain caused by loss. So the last thing you want to do is lose. So you will try everything and anything to avoid taking that loss. That's the first thing. Now that usually could be a variety of different behaviors. The first thing could be you could sit in this position and keep in that position without being prepared to exit that trade because you're losing. The second thing is that you might be prepared to take additional trades to cover up the actual loss. That's another common reaction to the trade. So that's what tends to happen when you're in a losing position. But more interestingly is what actually happens in a winning position. You know, the losing position seems to make a lot of sense, but what actually happens? What do you think you do when if you have this fear of losing? What happens when you get into a winning position? I expect you to know, having read prospect theory, right? No, actually, no. Absolutely the opposite happens. Absolutely opposite. For most people. I mean, obviously, every single person is difficult. Now, what actually happens is this: when you get into a winning position, your fear of losing actually takes over the fact that you are winning. So, say for example, you are running a position whereby you have a 20 pip stop loss and a 40 pip profit, and let's say you were down close to your stop loss. Often you'll be tempted to exit the trade when you get anywhere close to getting back to break even. And secondly, the second reaction would be, say, even if you don't even go into loss at any point on the trade, what you tend to be controlled by is this fear that you could lose the profit. Because not only are you fearing that you are going to lose on a trade, there is one greater fear than losing your initial stake, and that's actually losing your initial profit. So what you end up is you have a situation whereby if you actually get into a profitable situation, it's human nature to take profit off the table as soon as conveniently possible, or as soon as one's own psyche will allow one to do so. You know, i.e. not following through on your trading plan because there is the profit sitting there already, and you decide that it's better to take that than ever having to have the fear of going into loss. Does that make sense to you? And by doing that, you're destroying pretty much the trading plans that you set up before you start. Does this make any sense? Does this correlate to any of it? Good, excellent. So basically, ultimately, what we're doing is we fear loss so much that we are prepared to pretty much forego anything. Hence, why we're prepared to discount the future. And this is quite a common concept that is doing the rounds of behavioral economics for the last 10, 15 years. This idea that our human psyche will discount the future, and that's what Kahneman and Avansky are actually telling us in prospect theory, is that we're pretty much prepared to run losses to a ridiculous extent, but we're not prepared to take the profit. So if somebody offers a profit now rather than a profit in a month's time, we will take more times than not. We are prepared to take the profit now. Now this is just how humans are set up to be. This isn't something to be ashamed of or anything. It's just how we're set up to be. And what we have to do is we have to try and override these emotional feelings. And this is very much part and parcel of trading. And this is why I say when we start talking about trading, and when we started talking about Forex a couple of weeks back, is that I emphasize that ultimately the psychological side of things are going to have a much bigger impact upon your ability to be profitable as a Forex trader. That, going hand in hand with your ability to understand risk reward, those two factors can have far more effect than you will have being a great chartist and a great trader. In fact, some of the best chartists out there, i.e. some of the people who are best at predicting trades and the way the market goes, are some of the worst traders. And the reason is they don't have the psyche that is able to command the actual idea of following through and completing a trading plan. It's just not within them. They might be brilliant at being able to spot where you get into a market. They might even know where to get out. But the ability to sit and hold and stick with that position is actually far more difficult than you will understand until you start trying to do it. How many people, sorry, have actually traded here out of the guys that are here? How many ladies that are here? How many of you have actually traded at all? So you haven't traded at all. So you'll understand when you start to trade what I mean. And you've done some demo trade. Actually, you'll still find that even on the demo account, Gene, what I'm saying even applies that, you know, which seems to be ridiculous, bearing in mind that it's only imaginary money. You still have this fear of losing. It's a bit like tiddlywinks or whatever. This fear of losing is incredible inside the human psyche. We are not built to lose. And that's why if you can learn to lose, and you can learn to lose well, you will learn to be a great trader. And that is that's what marks out the best traders from those who will never make it as traders. So, you know, by the end of this, yes, you've got another couple of sessions, one with me and one with Kashif at the end, where we're going to spend a lot of time looking at strategies of trading, the actual charting things, and we'll be able to give you many different strategies of actually being able to pick a trade. But unless you understand this side of things, they will probably be next to useless to you, because if you can't follow through, it doesn't matter how much you know as a chartist, how much you know, and how good your ability is at picking a trade. If you cannot follow through, you have a big problem. Yeah, there's some, human psyche is a very fascinating area, and if you can spend some time on trading psychology as you go along, I mean, this is what I'm giving you in the first half of today's session, really just an introduction to what trading psychology is all about. And what I suggest you do is you move forward from here and look to try and educate yourself, reading various books as you go through your trading career. And the more you can understand, and the more you can build a strategy to be able to combat negative emotions that trading actually encourages in you as an individual, encourages in most individuals, the better you will become as a trader. So as much time as you spend working on charting, you need to spend as much time working on the psychology of the self. Socrates knew something all those years ago in 400 BC when he talked about know thyself. Know thyself is the most important thing you'll ever do. You have to understand yourself. Self-examination is the most important thing you do, because every one of you there, all five of you, each one of you is going to be different. Each one of you is going to have to work on different aspects of your trading psychology. One of you is going to be better than something else, another at doing something specific, or having less emotional attachment to a trade, maybe. But you will find that each one, once you understand yourself, once you have taken yourself apart from a psychological perspective and put yourself back together, that is the basis. That, with understanding the whole basis of the concept of risk reward, it will be the foundations of making you a great trader. Because then you can learn to be a good chartist and pick trades just with average success. Don't even have to be very good at it. Just half the time right, or slightly better than half the time, you will become a very rich person, or at least make decent money. And of course, if you become a very good at being able to predict trades, you will become an exceedingly rich person. And that's the difference. That's what marks out people who are successful and not successful in trading, isn't their ability to tell you when or when not to get into a trade. What the marks them out is their ability to be able to follow through with the trade and master the trading psychology. And you're going to find that out a lot as you go through your trading career. So, as I said, one of the most interesting factors is that this tends to get into a situation whereby if you have this traditional psyche where you fear loss more than you love your profits, then ultimately that will inevitably mean that you're going to end up holding trades far longer than you initially desired to, or even had a design in your trading plan to do so. Or far worse, start to add to positions that you really don't want to add to, this becomes a recipe for absolute and utter trading disaster. So you could have even actually found a trade that actually works. I mean, I've seen this a few times where people will open a trade with, say, maybe a 20 pip stop and maybe looking for 40, 50, 60 pips profit. Fine, that makes great sense. Good risk reward, 2 or 3 to 1 risk reward, but they don't get the fact that it might mean they have to go 20 pips negative, and they also won't get the fact that even for a good trader they're going to lose 3 out of 10 times. So what happens is they'll get minus 15 and they'll start to break their strategy. They'll start adding to their position. This is often the most common thing. And so they could actually add and blow themselves out the market before they even get to their stop loss, before they even get to a point where they get to a profit. And you could actually sit back and find that if you'd have followed your plan through as you predicted in the first place and actually stuck with it, you will find that it often would have come to fruition as you had expected it to do so. So the temptation to alter your plan when you're in a trade is immense, and this is something you have to master. Now, one of the things that is fascinating is with behavioral economics or behavioral psychology, especially with Daniel Kahneman and Avril Tversky. They did another study which is really about how humans sort of handled the whole idea of understanding the concept of money in terms of value. And this actually goes a great way to helping you understand how you're actually thinking as a trader. One of their studies, they actually, you remember last time I asked you about whether you'd buy a pen or a suit. I think I asked some of you guys about a pen or a suit. Well, another study that was done asked a different type of question, and this is almost as revealing as the pen and the suit question. But the question they asked, they'd asked two groups of people. Say you were going to the theatre. That's the first group of people. You're going to the theatre and you just paid $40 for 2 tickets. When you arrive at the theatre, you found you've lost the tickets. 60% of people actually said they would not replace those tickets. They then asked a second group of people. You're going to the theatre and the tickets cost $20. When you arrive at the theatre, you find that you've lost $40. But 60, I think actually slightly more than 60% actually would buy the tickets under those circumstances. Now, the question I'm going to ask you is why? Why would they buy the tickets under the circumstance 2 and not buy them under circumstance 1 when the actual monetary value is exactly the same? So I'll just repeat that. Scenario 1, you're going to the theatre, you've bought 2 tickets already, they've cost you $40, you get to the theatre, you find you've lost the tickets. So to buy 2 more would cost another $40, so your economic loss is $80, okay? Scenario 2, you go to the theatre, you've actually found you've lost the $40 you're going to use to buy the tickets, so you then just use another $40, and so again, your economic loss is exactly $80. So why under scenario A would you not buy the tickets, and under scenario B you would? Why? Come on. Throw some ideas at me. Anybody? Come on, don't be afraid to be wrong. It's not. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to get you to think. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make you start to think like a trader. Why is the first loss more? It's economically the same, Thelma. Can you expand a little bit? Are you looking at some other factor here? Yeah, that is definitely part and parcel of the answer, Bolton. But why? What is it about money and a ticket? No, you only need $40. You've lost $40 because you've either lost $40 or lost $40 in ticket value. You need 40 more to buy a ticket, another thing. So the economic loss is exactly the same. Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that, Bob, then. Yeah. That's true as well, Varun. Very true. But there's actually there's actually an economic reason for it. Interesting. Well, I'll tell you. What they found is this: humans compartmentalize loss. Does that make sense to everybody? And what I mean by this, what I mean by compartmentalize, in scenario one, they have set a budget for their tickets of $40. So by buying the tickets, they have spent their budget. Psychologically, no more budget for tickets. Does that make sense to everybody? That makes sense. Good. Now, number two, what haven't they done? They haven't bought the tickets yet. So what is happening is they're not attributing the loss to their ticket account. If you can imagine, you've parceled up your money into, and you won't necessarily do this, but you parcel up your money into various accounts. So this for the tickets, this for something else. So you haven't actually. So what you're doing is you're borrowing against other expenditure, and so therefore you are prepared to spend the money. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's not a question. The economics are exactly the same in both situations. But in the first scenario, you've already spent your budget. In the second scenario, because you lost $40, you didn't necessarily lose it from the budget of the tickets. You could argue I lost it from a shopping budget. Yeah. So you still have a budget for your tickets, and therefore you can still go through with the tickets. And therefore that is why under scenario two, you buy the ticket and not under scenario one, because you've budgeted. But this is incredibly important when it comes to Forex trade or any sort of trading. Okay? Because what do you think that means when it comes to trading? How do you think that applies when it comes to trading? Remember what we talked about last week? Anybody? I think we talked about last week. What did we talk? We talked about trading plans, didn't we? And we talked a little bit about risk reward. And what was the thing that we said when we talked about risk reward? Well, what we said was, yeah, what we actually said was that the risk has to be less than reward, correct? So we're working on the basis that if you are trading, your risk has got to be, say, 25% of possible reward, 1 to 4, or 50%, 1 to 2. Okay, and in that respect, you're setting a desired limit to the risk you're prepared to take. And in terms of trading, how you achieve that is by setting a stop loss. i.e. by setting some protection against which to trade in case the trade goes wrong. Okay, if that makes any sense. So that acts as your budget in this particular instance. So if you actually can get into that habit of physically setting your stops and actually get into the habit of creating a trading plan, you're getting some way as to mitigating some of the problems with regard to with regard to actually using compartmentalization that we all do. That's just something that's inbuilt into us as humans. Is using that as a technique to help you. Because what happens when you don't have a stop loss? Veron's right, and you are right as well, Sam. Great risk, because you don't have a budget. So you are continually borrowing against. You could borrow against the whole of your account balance, as Veron has just said, and as Thelma's pointed out. You can borrow against the whole of your account balance because you've set yourself no budget. So you're prepared. There's a much greater percentage chance of you going on and on and on in a trade unrealistically, because you haven't got a budget within which you are working to. Does that make sense to the rest of you there? Excellent. And that's the important thing. So, I give these examples, and you might think, well, what's that got to do with trading? But the examples from life, so you understand how they can impact upon yourself as a trader, because everything that you do as a trader is actually based on normal human psychology. Well, Veron, that is down to your person, ultimately down to your ability and discipline as a trader. And your ability to master trading psychology. If you have a good system, you can risk more. Personally, I don't. I risk less than that. I risk considerably less than that. But that's personal. But then I have battles with trading psychology, and always have done, which is why I find it so fascinating. And I've learned so much about it because I had to go to these levels to make myself a good trader, and most people do. Most people do. So I also understand that by risking less, I have less overall risk when it comes to my trading. Now, there are some people who have strong stomachs and strong spines and can actually trade with much greater risk. Those of you who come into the room will find Sam always risks 2% of his account on any trade. That's fine. That's up to him. I couldn't necessarily risk those sort of figures because I also always know there's always a possibility that I could break my discipline, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later as to what happens when you break your discipline, because actually it's also incredibly important. So ultimately, when we're getting into this, what we're doing is if we fail to set that trading budget, I fail to set some parameters to our trade, all we're actually going to achieve is putting our whole account at risk, because we're going to start borrowing against future trades. Now, you might not lose the whole of your account. Now that's unlikely anyway. Not you'd have to be foolhardy to actually get to that sort of level, but you could end up with a massive hole in your account that you didn't want when you first started the trade, that you're only looking for a small win. And pretty much all of you at some point might get into that situation, because I can't think of any trader who hasn't got into a situation where they've ended up losing a whole lot more money than they actually did. But what I'm trying to get across is you will recognize what's going on inside your mind. You'll be able to take corrective action. You'll be able to learn from it. It took me a long time to work out what the hell was going on, and I had to do a lot of study and a lot of research to find it out, because there aren't any books telling you all of this stuff, unfortunately. You have to, trading psychology is a very sparse area, considering how important it is. So it's something you have to, and that's mainly because we're all a little bit different. We all act in a little bit different ways. But the fundamentals are the same for us all. The basic building blocks of our psychology are the same. So it's something that we've got to recover. But that's not the beginning and the end of it, though. You also have to think about loss in another sense. What is also taking place with regard to loss in your psyche? When you make an investment, what's happening? You are doing it, you're not just doing it in a financial sense. What else are you doing? Let's just say when you make an investment, you make it on two levels. One's financial. What's the other level you are making an investment? Exactly, emotional. Absolutely 100%. You are making an emotional investment. And what's difficult, you are making an emotional investment. And what's difficult about an emotional investment? Yeah? And why is that? The reason is, yeah, you're absolutely right, Gene, and this is half the problem. It's the effect on your ego. And you hear a lot about the term ego. And I'm not necessarily looking at it in terms of ego as you would understand. I'm not giving it psychological terms. And you'll often hear me talk about things like ego depletion later, and it doesn't necessarily mean being embarrassed. It means a lot about depleting your willpower, and we'll get onto that later. But here we are talking a little bit in terms of the more common understanding of the term ego. But what you're doing is you're putting your own self on the line. You are putting your own judgment on the line. And when you lose, you are basically saying you got it wrong. Now, who likes to admit that they're wrong? You know, who is the one person you lie to yourself more than anybody else? Exactly, yourself. You know, we're all guilty of thinking we can do things we can't really do, or thinking we're better at things and we really know we're not, but we'll convince ourselves we are. We're all guilty of that. I don't know many people. I've really come across anybody not guilty of that in some way or other. And this is why it's so important to understand that you are like this, because it means you can approach and have some ability to do something about it. Not understanding means that you don't understand what the next steps are to do something about it. Now, emotional and financial are very, very interesting. Has anybody ever read about the two sides of the brain? Has everybody heard about the elephant brain and the rational brain? Anybody ever read or come across that? Okay. Well, inside your mind, there are two sides to your mind. You have the emotional, the artistic side, and then you have the what one would call the facts and figures side. Now, when you buy something in a shop, you are working on two levels. You are working on an emotional want to buy something. So you often end up buying something on an emotional whim, because what you find is the emotional side often trumps the facts and figure side of your brain. So although you know or are aware of the cost of doing something, often an emotional reaction is to buy. Now, has anybody ever felt that when they bought something, got home and suddenly thought, what else did I buy that? Yeah, I'd be surprised if anybody writes no. Precisely, Gene. You know, that's exactly what you're right. And this is how we think. And the reason is because our emotional side is much bigger than our rational side. Now, it's not impossible for our rational side. It's not impossible for our rational side to have some measure of control. But what we need to do is appeal to both at the same time. And I love a great example I read in in the book, and I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, this particular book, but I'll think of it in a minute. But one of the examples I gave was about a company who I can't remember, it was an industrial manufacturing company, and had a series of different processes, and these processes involved the use of gloves, different types of glove, and it was a multinational company with factories all over the world. And one particular guy realized that they were actually using several different, I think it was several hundred different types of latex glove, different suppliers, different manufacturers, and the cost of this was actually phenomenal when it came to it. And he often used to write notes for his superiors to say, actually, did you know we're actually spending, tens of thousands of pounds each month on various different latex glove. If we just use this one type of glove or these two types of glove, it would cover all the processes that we need, and you would save tens of thousands of pounds. And often the board wouldn't do anything. They'd say, yes, I understand, but they couldn't see it. It was a saving, yes, but they couldn't see it. So do you know how he actually got them to change their course? How do you think he went about changing their minds? Bearing in mind we're appealing to the emotional side. Any ideas? It's probably a bit unfair because you don't know the story, but what he went and did is he bought or got hold of one pair from every single manufacturing place and process from all around the globe, and got all of these gloves, and literally there were thousands of pairs of gloves, took it into the boardroom before a board meeting and piled them all onto the table, and apparently it covered the whole table and part of the floor. And when the board went in, all they could see is gloves everywhere. What do you think the board's reaction was? No? Yes, obviously surprised, but they understood his point. They walked into a room and they understood that there were literally hundreds and hundreds of pairs of different types of gloves. They all knew that one or two would do the job, and they hadn't understood. And so when he presented the picture with the financial facts, so if you can imagine imagine all these gloves on the table and his PowerPoint showing him how much it actually was costing them to do it, they actually understood the point he made. And what I'm trying to tell you is that if you can marry the emotional side of your brain with the rational side of your brain, then you will understand. So if you can find a way of visualizing your loss when you are trading, as opposed to just looking at the plain facts and figures, you are going to actually have a great deal more ability to be able to control your losses. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so the one thing that you're trying to do then is to visualize your losses. Try and find any sort of form. It might be something stupid that you've bought in the past. If you can imagine placing a series of photographs of crazy things that you bought on the wall in front of your trading station, or something to that effect, something that will trigger in your mind, that will you be able to relate that to the amount that you're losing, go a tremendous way to be able that with regard to being able to set yourself budgets will go a great way to be able to control your losses. Yes, it is. You see, one of the great things I often think about, I can't remember the chap's name off the top of my head. I'll think of it in a second. Oh God, I hate it when I can't think of it. Yeah, Michael. Sorry, Michael. Anybody ever heard of something called Michael Phelps? probably one of the greatest swimmers that's probably ever lived. Okay, and what people don't realise is that, especially in the Beijing Olympics where he won all of his medals, there was one particular event where he was, meant to be the master of, which was, I think it was 200 meters butterfly, something like that. It doesn't really matter which the event was, but the point is that he had a problem during the race. Now, ever since he was about 15, he'd been working a Pacific coach, and one of the things the coach taught him to do was every single night when he went out, the coach asked him to visualize his races, i.e. from the moment he set foot in the changing room to the moment that he finished the race, he had to visualize every single stage of that race. Okay, and he got him to do that. And then what he then got him to do is then he told him to visualize possible problems that could happen inside that when you had that particular, if he was in a particular race. And what he tended to do is he then every night he used to say to Phelps when he went home is play the tape. And what he was saying to him was play your mental videotape. So every night he'd go to bed and he'd rewind his swim that he could do time after time after time. So he mentally practiced his swim time after time after time. When he got to the Beijing Olympics, he dived off his blocks and dived into the water. And within about 3 scopes, he realized that there was a leak on his goggles. He couldn't see a thing. And so he basically had to swim the whole race blind. And by swimming the whole race blind, the way he managed to do it was because he'd done this mental visualization so many times. He knew exactly how many strokes it would take for him to get from one end of the pool to the other. He knew exactly at what point he was in the pool at all times. And he just went into the mode of playing the tape. And when he actually got to the end of the race, he was just desperate to hope that he'd won, because he thought, well, without being able to see, I won't, I'll be lucky to have won this race. And of course, it turned out that he'd won by probably one of the greatest distances in any race ever, and he smashed the world record by, I think, a couple of seconds, some enormous amount anyway. And the point was, because he'd had a mental process to do it. Can you see how that would get you in trading? If you have a mental process which you can rely on, which you can call upon when you get into trouble, you then have the ability to be able to get yourself out of trouble. So can you see how this way of dealing with things can actually help you? Everybody?